So, good morning, good afternoon, dear valued audience, dear colleagues. Very warm welcome to this Vienna Energy Forum 2021 site event hosted by Energizing Development. The next 60 minutes, as well as the guide we are going to launch today, are devoted to tiers, markets, sustainability, trends in rural off-grid electrification. Let me please introduce first myself. My name is Gregor Brömling, and I'm working in the NDEF headquarters on the site of GIZ. And I'm part here of the Rural Electrification team. And I do have the pleasure to be your host and moderator of today's panel discussion. The SDG 7 achievement by the end of this decade is becoming more and more challenging. We are off track to meet the target, and the COVID-19 pandemic is an extra burden. More concrete efforts, especially in the off-grid sector, and in particular in Sub-Saharan Africa, are required. For this purpose, every possible optimization potential needs to be activated. Key market trends in the off-grid electrification sector should be considered together with a set of sustainability indicators to accelerate the deployment and maximize the impact of off-grid electrification projects. The panel discussion today, as well as the guide that has been produced, are aimed to contribute to this goal. Our agenda for today's session foresees a short introduction presentation to the guide, followed by a panel discussion, and in the end, we will have some dedicated time for a Q&A session. Please post your questions in the Q&A section on the very right of your window. And please don't use the chat box. You see in the very right, there's a Q&A session. In the center, you see like which people are here with us. And on the left, there's a chat box. If possible, please direct the question to one of the panelists you would like to address. You will also have the chance to like questions of other participants, so we will see where the hot topics are. But before I introduce you to the distinguished panelists, and we do get an introduction to the guide, please allow me to tell a few words about the NDEF program and also where the guide comes from. Energizing Development is operating since 2005 and became one of the largest on-the-ground technical assistance programs for energy access in the world. Means we do help people, schools, health centers, and companies to gain access to electricity or improved cooking technologies in over 20 countries around the globe. By the end of 2020, NDEF facilitated sustainable access to modern energy service and technologies in total for 23 million people, 28,000 social infrastructures, and more than 73 micro, small, medium-sized enterprises. At present, NDEF is striving to further develop and structure its learning and innovation agenda with the intention of sharing its results with the wider SDG 7 community. And in this regard, we also developed this session today and the guide. So the aim is that this shared knowledge can lead to both a higher pace of implementation, which is urgently needed, and an increased impact of the NDEF program. So the results shared can also inform similar initiatives in the field. On the behalf of NDEF, the guide was authored by Inensus with contributions from the NDEF Rural Electrification Group of Practitioners. This group is coordinated by GIZ, and its further members come from RVO, SNV, Practical Action, and AFSI. But furthermore, the guide also considered valuable input from the outside, for example, from Bbox, Bidasasa, Get Transform, Greenlight Planet, SoulShare, UNDP Yemen, Winch Energy, and I hope I haven't forgot here anyone. All right, I think now it's time to get a glimpse and some key snapshots from the guide. Let me kindly introduce you to the co-author, Andrea Caballero from Inensus. Andrea works as a mini-grid expert at Inensus and currently working as an advisor to NDEF. She has over 5 years of experience in the field of decentralized renewable energy, and this includes also due diligence, technical and economic evaluation of mini-grid projects, as well as she served before a planning and development specialist in the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency in Cairo, Egypt. Andrea, thanks a lot for all your work and efforts you put into the guide, and a special thanks to you since you are spontaneously jumping in, since our colleague Johannes unfortunately is sick today and has no voice. That's also the reason why Andrea is shown as Johannes Holziegel, so just in case you wonder. Andrea, please share some insights from the guide with us. And yes, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Gregor, for this warm welcome. Just 1 second, the slides are visible, right? Okay, good. Yes, so my name is Andrea Cabañero. I am a mini-grid expert at Idensus. We are an advisory firm specialized in rural electrification in emerging economies with a focus in Sub-Saharan Africa. And today it is my absolute pleasure to be launching the NDEP guide, Tiers, Markets, Sustainability, Trends in Rural Off-Grid Electrification. As outlined by Gregor, the NDEP guide is building both on practical examples from NDEP's own implementation of off-grid electrification projects and on learnings from some of the leading private companies and non-governmental organizations in the sector as well. We hope that you will find it to be not only an interesting but inspiring read, and that hopefully it may even trigger some further conversation and discussions down the line. Before we talk about the guide, however, we should remind ourselves that as of today, we are not on track to deliver universal access to electricity by the end of this decade. There is no doubt that there has been significant progress on energy access over the last few years. However, as the International Energy Agency has pointed out, if we follow current stated policies, then more than 600 million people will still lack access to electricity by 2030. And the majority of these people will be living in the Sub-Saharan African region. The ongoing COVID-19 crisis has, of course, made the situation even worse. The total number of people without electricity access had actually been reducing since 2013, but then again in 2020, the gap towards our target increased once more. To achieve universal access by the end of this decade, we need to triple spending on electricity access and electrify people faster than in some of the fastest developing nations, which include China and India. So to summarize, what we require to achieve universal access is truly an unprecedented effort. Basing on this, the guide that we have developed has two primary objectives. First, it intends to accelerate the deployment of off-grid electrification by presenting challenges and lessons learned in the off-grid sector over the last few decades. When replicated by practitioners, these lessons can accelerate rural electrification efforts. The guide identifies some of the key market trends in the sector at the moment, and these sectors will influence how final beneficiaries are provided with reliable and affordable electricity for the foreseeable future. On the other side, secondly, the impact and longevity of off-grid electrification solutions to be deployed is to be maximized. By developing indicators for sustainability, the guide emphasizing that it is not only important for energy access to be realized today, but that this access needs to be delivered in a way that is long-lasting and efficient for it to be meaningful. The guide, as developed, is covering all off-grid solutions from small-scale Pico PV over solar home systems and nanogrids all the way to mini-grids. By considering all off-grid solutions, we can ensure that all beneficiaries, whether smallholder farmers, public institutions, commercial customers, can receive adequate access to electricity that meets their needs. And by conducting interviews with off-grid practitioners from NDEP, NDEP's partners, other international organizations, as well as the private sector, we have been able to identify key market trends in the off-grid sector for the different electrification solutions presented. So already ongoing trends include the increased fostering of productive use of energy across solar home system, nanogrids, and mini-grid sectors. Indeed, new DC-based appliances allow solar home systems to cover more and more usage cases, including welding, freezing, and heating water, for instance. Digitalization is a universal trend across all off-grid systems and beyond, in fact, with mobile payments now being accepted by most off-grid companies, and remote monitoring and management of systems already being common practice. Companies are now starting to apply artificial intelligence solutions as well, making operations even more efficient and helping to improve customer service. Solar home system companies in particular are also bundling more and more diverse products and services onto the systems deployed, and are able to enforce payments by remotely switching off the solar system's electricity output when this is necessary. Such products and services cover a vast range from mobile phones, efficient cook stoves, and also bicycles to microfinance and insurance services. On the more midterm trends is the switch from lead acid to lithium-ion batteries. That's specifically or especially for mini grids. Second life lithium-ion batteries, which may be repurposed, for example, from electric vehicles, may also open up some interesting avenues for mini grid design. And then also several interesting pilot projects exist for the processing of natural resources with the electricity provided by mini grids. We anticipate that more and more mini grid operators will get directly involved in the processing and trading of these goods in remote off-grid areas, with this trend broadly titled as rural industrialization. The concept has already been successfully trialed by some companies, including Jumeme in Tanzania, who is purchasing, freezing, and trading tilapia fish caught in Lake Victoria on site using the mini grid electricity. The final two trends are rather long-term. Over time, through acquisitions, joint ventures, growth strategies, organizations will likely cover communities in their entirety, offering tailored solutions to all beneficiaries, with these solutions ranging from solar home systems over to nanogrids and mini grids. Some early promising pilots exist for companies who are offering integrated solutions to off-taker communities. And we anticipate that this trend will amplify over the following years. The growth of off-grid organizations will finally also enable a commercially viable capitalization of reductions in CO2 emissions and reduce the transaction cost of achieving or accessing carbon credits. Some initiatives supporting this trend, such as the creation of a new global mechanism for the certification of distributed renewable energy, or in short, the RECs, are already ongoing. When developing the guide's recommendations, it was important for us that the challenges and lessons learned are not considered in isolation, but that their interaction and interrelation is clearly highlighted. So trying to implement a bit more of a systems thinking approach. We have already made considerable progress in rural off-grid electrification, that's true, and challenges at the intersection of finance, institutions, society, technology, and the environment need to be addressed holistically to enable us to make access to electricity long-lasting. Specific recommendations made by the guide include, among others, first of all, we need to get away from developing standardized blanket approaches, which are developed in one country or region and then applied almost without adaptation to an entirely different country or context. It is important instead that we tailor off-grid electrification projects to a particular cultural, social, economic, environmental, institutional, and technological context. There are lessons, of course, that we may learn in one country that can be utilized in another country. However, we should not put ourselves in the false belief that something that may work in Kenya, for example, will be equally applicable in Togo or Sierra Leone. On the other side, most of the past and current initiatives have focused on technology, supply side, as a primary driver for what solution should be deployed in a particular community. Almost all programs to which off-grid communities can apply specific the technology that is intended to be deployed. This approach carries with it the danger that end beneficiaries may not end up using the technology that is being given to them. And so by focusing on an end beneficiaries first and supplying to them exactly the product or service that their demand requires, we may electrify communities more adequately, which also means more sustainably and long-term. Third, the e-waste generated by off-grid electrification projects is an often, or has so far until now been an overlooked factor of these projects. We need to be aware that all the components deployed have a limited lifetime. And when projects are initially conceptualized at an early stage, this fact should not be one more thing in the to-do list that we leave in the end, but rather be embraced and appropriate solutions put in place so that we do not end up with mountains of solar e-waste in the decades to come. To summarize the key recommendations of the developed guide, we may say that we need to find ways to continue fostering the entire range of off-grid solutions so that all beneficiaries, starting from the individual farmer in remote regions all the way to large and perhaps inaccessible off-grid communities, are supplied with adequate access to electricity. Different technologies work complementarily, not competitively. We should also make sure to remember refugees living in displacement settings, as well as at the bottom of the pyramid in this picture, who may not be able to afford electricity solutions provided by the market-driven programs and corporations. So following today's launch of the guide on trends in rural off-grid electrification, the guide may be accessed on the NDEP's website, and of course, feel free to get in touch with the authors. We will definitely be looking forward to hearing from you and are excited to see some of the recommendations in place in the guide implemented across Sub-Saharan Africa. Before I conclude, I would once more like to thank our donors, without whose support the development of this guide would not have been possible. And well, thank you for your attention. And I will now hand back over to Gregor for what will hopefully make an interesting panel discussion.
Yes, thanks a lot, Andrea. Wonderful and great presentation. Even so, it has been just a glimpse for everyone here. But yes, as already also has been requested in the chat box, I posted the link to the guide, and yeah, later on, I wish you all a happy reading. But yeah, for now, let's go over to start our panel discussion, and let me also take the chance to finally introduce the panelists for today. I'm very delighted to be joined today by a very knowledgeable and experienced panel of speakers. Thank you for being with us today. Naid Hussein from UNDP Yemen. Naid is the Deputy Representative from UNDP Yemen Country Office, and she joined the United Nations 15 years ago and worked in different senior management capacities. And since 2019, she's now been appointed for a current position in Yemen. Yemen is for UNDP one of the largest operations in the world. So Naid, very much looking forward to hear from you about your project experience from Yemen. Furthermore, we have from the private sector today with us Radhika Thakur. Radhika is the Vice President of Corporate Affairs for Greenlight Planet, a leader in the global distributed off-grid energy industry. Greenlight Planet designs, distributes, and finances high-quality, affordable solar home energy systems for off-grid and underserved households across Africa, Asia, Central America, under the consumer brand Sun King. Furthermore, Radhika is elected current president of the board of directors of Gobla. So good to have a private sector voice today with us. Thanks for being with us, Radhika. And last but not least, from our NDEF team on the ground, Orkje de Jager. As a business developer with vertical technical mindset, Orkje has been working as a project manager in multi-dimensional settings for nearly 20 years. From public-private partnerships and projects in urbanism in the European Union, she continued working in rural development in Mali for the last 10 years, whereof the last 7 as a project manager for NDEF GIZ. Thanks a lot, Orkje, for representing NDEF today with the experience from the ground. Okay, let us start with the panel discussion, and I would like to also have reflected what we have heard from Andrea and also what is the experience from the ground. And therefore, I would like to start with you, Orkje. The guide is introducing some of the key lessons learned as well as market trends in the off-grid sector. But Orkje, you as an implementer from the ground and working since years in the off-grid sector in NDEF Mali, how practical would you say those recommendations presented are for you and your work?
Well, to me, I think, first of all, it is clear that it's not a guide that you can take in your hands and you go to whatever village, wherever in the world, and finally you know what to do. No, not at all. I think that the message is, in fact, very different. And as you mentioned in your introduction, we are looking for a higher pace of execution. And I think I would like to add a more sustainable one as well. I have never done it, but I would be interested to see if all the investment in hardware that has been done everywhere in the world had been sustainable. I think we would be a lot closer to our goals, and that is where this guide hits in. So based on experience on the ground from NDEF and partners and the private sector for over 15 years, some very valuable lessons have been learned and are shared through this guide. So sustainability, of course, is something that everyone says we are doing it. Of course, things should be sustainable, affordable, long-lasting. But in the field, and now I'm talking for the case of Mali, it is not yet done. And that is a very important lesson to learn, and we can only learn that together. And I think in that way, this guide is helping to bring those lessons forward to a very large public. And it has already been said, so there's a lot of information behind the lesson. So please, for whoever reads the guide, I would really invite you to read it and to bring further questions, because there's a lot that has been learned. When we talk about use of systems, you really need to consider we are often electrifying social institutions or households or whatever in a village that is otherwise not electrified. So there's a full context that needs to be taken into consideration, and many lessons have been learned the hard way. So I hope through this guide, and that's the practical part, it will be more easy to go ahead and to really accelerate electrification.
Thanks a lot, Orke, for your answer, and also for pointing out what's important also for the future. And you also mentioned the questions which has to be addressed, and this I will directly take up and ask again the audience if you have questions on the guide itself, which has been, of course, just in a glimpse presented, but also on the answers of our panelists. Please be so kind and post them in the Q&A part on the very right of the window you see in front of you. Well, let's go over then to Nahid. So the UNDP Yemen, Nahid, has developed a very impressive project that addresses a key question for sustainability of off-grid projects. How do you ensure that women are not only participating in, but also actively empowered through off-grid projects? Nahid, would you be able to expand on that?
Thank you very much, Gregor, for giving us this opportunity to connect with you from Sana'a. So to answer your question, one of UNDP core area of work is empowerment of women at all levels and also at all fronts, socially, economically, and politically. And this is usually done through development of a gender-responsive programs and project. And we set up at corporate level and also at country office level a different monitoring mechanism. And also we developed indicators against which we will be able to measure the progress. So considering the Yemen context, which is one of the world's worst humanitarian and development crises, the role of women is becoming increasingly important than ever. So this is also because of the impact of the conflict on gender, and women in particular became a household with responsibilities to provide for their families. So I just to give you an example, according to the statistics, 30% of displaced population in Yemen are women. So those women, they have to provide their families, and not only their families, but also the extended families. So through the support of the solar off-grid, UNDP included women as a partner and not beneficiaries. And I think generally, if we want to see women empowered, we need to go beyond the beneficiaries model and also create a space where there is a dignity, decent job, and good opportunities for women to overcome the cultural and the social barriers, especially in Yemen within a very conservative environment. So as for this specific project, UNDP supporting women are able to come together because of the off-grid opportunity, which has provided them not only with income, but also the design of the solar project has strengthened their confidence to work in the energy sector, which is very untraditional. So as I said, if we want to ensure active empowerment, we need to design the project together with our partners and with women to ensure that it is not only to promote women as a partner, but also to create enabling environment for those women to overcome the challenges and the difficulties.
Thank you very much, Nait.
Over to you, Gregory.
And also thank you very much for this concrete example that I think shows it very well and then gives a clear direction. Let's move over to the private sector. Radhika, Greenlight Planet has been an innovator in the PV and solar home system space for almost 15 years now. But how do you consider gender as aspects, and what does it mean for your business processes? Very interesting to hear also the other side a bit.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll build on what Nahid has shared already. I think just from our perspective, our products are not necessarily designed for functionality that caters to one gender over another. They're designed for household use. However, we do know that women and children disproportionately benefit from our products, primarily because around the world they spend more time indoors where, in absence of access to the grid, we'd be using fuel, kerosene lamps or candles. And so there's a lot more indoor air exposure. So knowing that not only do women and the kinds of activities women tend to control in the household benefit more from our products, we also know that women influence a lot of decisions for larger investments that benefit the household and the family. So knowing that we tend to market and communicate the value proposition of our products, speaking to these areas. So the benefits that children experience by studying with a solar lamp, a clean, bright light, instead of having to study next to a kerosene lamp, which is emitting noxious fumes and straining the eyes. The benefits to gathering within the household or creating safe environments and ability to commute at night without the dangers of what might be lurking in the dark. These things tend to appeal a little bit more to the cares of and sort of the mind of women in the household. So a lot of the communication of the value is certainly targeting what women think about. It also informs then how we actually reach our customers. So in our business processes, as you mentioned, and this comes out in a few ways. One, in South Asia, in India, a lot of the ways that we market and finance products for our customers is through partnerships with microfinance institutions. Almost 100% of MFI clients are female in India. And so we are very much directly speaking to women when we are getting our products into households in South Asia. And then in Africa, where a lot of our sales and financing happens through our pay-as-you-go products, we rely on sales agents, commission-based sales agents, to bring our products to communities, largely rural areas, and create awareness, and then provide a sales point and an after-sales service point as well. And about 40% of our sales agents, we have about 7,000 agents across the continent, about 40% of them are female. And they, again, can communicate with the women in their communities, make the products available, and really communicate the value proposition. So gender absolutely influences or weaves into the how we get our energy solutions out to our consumers.
Great, thanks a lot for this elaboration. That's also very clear and gives, of course, a clear picture for the smaller systems. Moving now a bit to the bigger system in the sense of talking about mini grids. And then there's a question I have for Orkje. Orkje, when it comes to design of mini grid projects, as you also have experience with NF Mali, what would you consider to be some of the most important aspects to ensure that they are sustainable? I mean, that's also a very important fact, I think. So.
Yes, well, I think, in fact, that Mali, first of all, is a very interesting country, I think, to learn lessons on mini-grid development. Why? Because there have been a lot of mini-grids that have been developed in the past. So there are over 250, and let's just state it, and they've only directly financed 2. Yet we did a lot of learning on the full development of the sector. What is important, most important, I would in fact say that if we look at the sustainability chain that has been presented, just not to forget one chain, because it will fall. And that it doesn't really matter. So in Mali, it has been mostly a technology push approach initially. So there was just a huge financing that even was the base of the actual rural electrification agency. That came in with mini grid solutions that have been realized in all villages requiring urgent electrification needs. Not even looking really if a mini-grid solution was the adapted approach in that village. So that's already something that can be, that must be learned. There's a lot of lessons to be learned on operation. There's a lot of, I think there's a full sector which is in Mali at present very donor-driven. And everyone is having, of course, the public procurement procedures. Yet what happens is that when one operator will have a mini-grid in one village, and 5 kilometers further is another operator, 5 kilometers further there's another operator. We do not really reach all the benefits of scale. So there are lessons to be learned in how to finance. There are lessons to be learned on how to maintain, how to choose your villages, how to get a cost-effective pricing to allow the private sector to reinvest. Because if sustainability is that, I mean, it's not that the private sector is living on the rural population that is very poor. No, not at all. There needs to be a healthy sector development. And I think that's one of the most important lessons learned. And really, it's about not forgetting one of the pearls in the chain, because it will definitely fall. And also everything regarding repair, recycling, as we continue to develop mini-grids, as we continue to develop also large solar parks. If we do not advance our vision on the recycling as well, it's not an acute problem at present, but it will come. So I think basically, if I can address something, there's a lot of lessons learned, but that's too detailed in Mali, and it's really about taking into account seriously all aspects. And for me, it's also really about solid collaborations between the public and private sector to really reach sustainability.
Thanks a lot. And yeah, you mentioned the private sector, and that brings me to the commercial viability, which is indeed one of the key aspects to address within mini grids. And we do not have only here Radhika from the private sector, also Andrea, basically from Inensos, is also from the private sector. And yes, Inensos is an advisory for mini grids, but also a shareholder in mini grids projects. So Andrea, I would like to ask you, have you developed an interesting approach to achieve commercial viability? That could be also like a base for good sustainability approaches, right? So.
Yeah, indeed, commercial viability is the topic. Mini-grids are a necessary part of the equation, and commercial viability is a pending topic to untap the potential of mini-grids. So we at Inensos, we try to tackle both sides of the equations. We try to support mini-grid operators at reducing costs, so the cost structure aspect. And on the other side, we're also piloting new business models that work in the direction of increasing the revenue side. On the cost aspect, we have developed an open source management software for mini-grids called Micropower Manager. It allows mini-grid operators to remotely manage and monitor their mini-grids. It's available today, free of charge, completely open source. So that's on the one side. To increase the revenue aspect, there is a lot of business model piloting. We have so far successfully been able to implement a pilot project in Tanzania via our subsidiary in Jumeme, where what we do is we use the mini-grid electricity on the ground and then purchase the fish from the fishermen community, many of which are customers of our electricity business. So we purchase the fish from the fishermen, and then we use the electricity to process and freeze the tilapia, and then we trade this fish across, Dar es Salaam, the capital, and beyond. This business, agro-business, is providing substantial additional cash flows that also fit into the mini-grid business. And it is in fact only possible because of the access of electricity and the established management structures on the ground. Now we are piloting the same business model, but in another value chain. We want to do this in Uganda. We are currently building some mini grids there that will be used to process and trade vanilla and chili. Our intention is then to check or to prove the case not only for fish value chain, but also in many other agricultural value chains.
Thanks, Andrea, for raising this interesting point about the ability of mini-grids to be used for value-added services. Radhika, have we seen any progress in particular in the solar home system space over the last few years on this, and what other technologies and businesses innovations have we seen? Maybe also a bit comparable to what Andrea was just referring to.
Yeah, sure. Certainly we operate at a very different scale because we're making, solutions for the household, either portable lamps or solar home systems. But we do see our product portfolio, not just Greenlight Planets, but our peers in the distributed side of the industry evolve. I think both as a reflection of what our customers want. So going back to the guide, the idea of demand side, right? It's what our customers are asking us for, the other needs that they want us to solve, as well as what technology and advancements in technology afford. So in the last few years, we have launched solar-powered fans, solar-powered televisions. Fans really contribute to cooling, particularly in super hot climates, and televisions provide a range, certainly entertainment, but in this last year with COVID and schools closed and, a lot of workplaces unreachable, the ability to provide educational content for children through solar-powered televisions was tremendously beneficial, radios as well. So certainly there's an element of the actual technology that we power through our core solar home systems, and what additional appliances we can afford there. The other aspect of this goes back to the ideas of the digitization, both the use of mobile money to finance, or PAYGO really to finance investments in solar home systems, as well as the technological abilities to remotely switch off access. This actually allows us to then finance or provide other types of products and services that might not be a solar home system or an add-on to a solar home system at its core, but things like we have been financing clean cook stoves tied to the core asset of our solar home system. So even though we can't turn off the cook stove, we can extend the duration of the pay-as-you-go plan of the solar home system to enable a family to then make an investment in a clean cooking solution. We're experimenting with a lot of additional add-on, products and services that, at least in our case, all have some social life-enhancing good at their core, but don't necessarily have that ability for a remote switch off. You can't turn off an insurance product, right? But you can turn off a solar home system if the payment is not made. And so that's where we see an incredible amount of opportunity to continue providing really valuable, life-changing products and services for our customers, using energy as the start, energy and mobile connectivity, I'd say, as the start to build on.
Great, thank you, Radhika, and interesting aspects here. We also have heard earlier from Okia some similar things. And when it comes to lessons learned, I also would again come back to Nahid from UNDP Yemen. Nahid, while you are implementing your projects in Yemen, what lessons learned you have learned and could be applied by other organizations as NDEF, as well as all the others who are working in the same field and context? Would be interesting to also get a bit more light on that from your perspective. Of course, your context is rather specific, I guess, but nonetheless, the lessons learned are probably transferable in the one or the other way.
Yes, of course. The implementation of this project really provided us with a lot of lessons learned, and also, related to the sustainability, but also the replication of this project. So as I indicated at the beginning, when I answered the first question, Yemen is considered one of the worst humanitarian context or humanitarian crisis context. So where you have, a lot of facilities have been destroyed because of the conflict. The national institutions have been dismantled, is also because of the conflict or because of the lack of the capacity. So one of the lessons learned, I can share with you from the implementation of this project, is working with community is crucial. in this fragile context. So it is very important to work beyond the delivery of the project and we looked at the project as a social cohesion and reconciliation support mechanism where the community come together, but also the community, they have the opportunity to recognize the role of the women beyond being in the house. So as a business manager, but also contributing to designing such creative projects, but also the role of the women to contribute to the delivery of the essential services to their own communities. So one of the lessons learned, I just want to confirm the engagement with communities, it's very instrumental. So this approach of one size fits all, as pointed out by the panelists here, it is not recommendable. The second lessons learned is the creation of the business model should go beyond a project. So it should assist sustainability of the income, but also the sustainability of access to clean energy. And where is the best place to do that other than Yemen? I mean, where you have a harsh environment conditions, but also you have, I mean, the opportunity of the sun and then the lack of the electricity. So this is the best opportunity to move from to the solar microgrid initiatives. The third lessons learned is this kind of support, and within this context of the crisis in Yemen, where you have 80% of the population depends and rely on the international aid, this kind of projects and this kind of initiatives really reduce the reliance on the international aid. It also gives the community and the women the opportunity to feel dignified while they're serving their population, and also contributing to a long-term development agenda at community level. The fourth one is looking at the diversification of the off-grid model to support the public services. So as I said, I mean, 50% of the health facilities in Yemen have been destroyed by the conflict and they are not operational at all. Similarly, the schools as well. So those kind of projects, I mean, usually serve and have a great impact on those essential sectors. So supporting this kind of initiatives will definitely assist stabilize the delivery of the basic services and simultaneously grant sustainable income and access to energy. The last one is working again in humanitarian context. Any initiatives should be complemented by a developmental one. So first of all, to ensure that humanitarian assistance is not going to constitute a fragility trap for those countries, but the countries, they have hope to move on to implement and to tackle a long-term developmental agenda. This is very few lessons learned from a long list, but the important one, and I really hope that my colleagues in this panel and also the audience will be able to benefit from it. Thank you very much, Gregory.
Great, I'm pretty sure they will benefit from it. And then there's also already one question on that, which we'll come later on to. Thanks a lot, Milton, for writing this question. Also, to the other participants of this panel discussion, please use the question and answer chat box in the very right of your window. We have like another 2 to 3 questions here in the panel, and then we would move over to the Q&A session. So please feel welcome to take part in the discussion. Yes, Orkia, also to reflect a bit self-critical from the side of NDEF, are we adapting in our approach while implementing off-grid project? Are we really like also doing this based on lessons learned so far? So I would like to hear your open opinion from the ground.
Well, it would be strange to say that we don't do it, but in fact, I find that NDEF is really a project because we do such a lot of follow-up. So we facilitated a lot of energy electrification solutions, but we have been following up on for 15 years. So just taking again the case of NDEF Mali, we started technology push. We delivered the very first solar panels in rural villages. We've seen other solutions coming in. We've seen problems with the private sector. And we take that in account, and we in fact also really change the approach. So yes, lessons learned on a small scale. So sometimes it's very micro scale, but also a very large scale. We do take them into account. And for NDEF, it really changed the approach. So we went from this technology driven where we delivered battery charging stations at a moment that no one had access to electricity at all. We went to an approach where it's really about demand, supply, and enabling environment in something that we call an integrated approach to electrification. So, which is a lot more demand driven and looking at an area, what's the real demand and there's such a lot of technologies that are available, but how can we really electrify and reach those goals in, I'd say it again, in a sustainable way. So I'm sorry for saying sustainable such a lot of time, but this is the study, and there are the lessons learned. And the integrated approach for me is one of the things that we really changed, and we went from demand driven. We also did a lot of work in clinics, not going in with a solar home system, but firstly identifying the demand. And you might be shocked because you will see that there might be clinics without anything, as there might be clinics with 4 or 5 systems, and you don't know you don't know how to put a light anymore. So when you look at the real demand, first of all, people take you more seriously. That's our experience. And when you focus that on an area and you develop a clear vision on how to electrify with what technologies going from grid and off grid together, and you use that as a framework for investment, that's what we are doing now. I'm not saying that's easy. There's lessons learned there as well, and it will be a process where we will continue to learn. But to me, that's one of the most important changes that we have made in the NDEF approach in Mali, really based on lessons learned and with the vision to reach scale.
Thanks a lot. And yes, also from the headquarters side, we are of course happy to support that process further. And also this guide is at least trying to addressing those. And coming back to the guide once more, and also to finalize our panel discussion, Andrea, what do you believe to be the single most important takeaway from this discussion that is reflected in the guide on the trends on rural electrification?
Well, I think we touched upon many interesting aspects of the equation. However, I would probably say that in our pursuit of achieving Sustainable Development Goal number 7, we should remember that off-grid electricity access is not automatically sustainable. So we see this by many projects that are being implemented, but not necessarily scaled or sustained in time. So we each have to make an active effort that off-grid electricity is on the one side green, so green sustainability to achieve climate goals, that it is commercially viable so that investors can generate some returns over the long term, because in the end of the day, universal access to electricity can only be achieved when the private sector jumps in and trusts the potential in the sector. And most importantly, that these electrification strategies that were developed or projects that we're developing are designed with longevity in mind, so that beneficiaries can not only switch on the bulbs today, but continue enjoying the benefits of electricity. And while this implies also tackling multiple aspects beyond the project development and installation phases.
All right, great. Thanks a lot. I would now say we first close the panel and give the chance for some questions from the audience. There have been some questions already posted and also already answered, so we have a very active panelists here. Nonetheless, Nahid, would you like to also say a few more words on the question of Milton about the carbon tax as a form of financing? Maybe it's worth to say a bit more than you have posted in the chat.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the chat box, we are not there yet. So all we are implementing now is the solar microgrid projects, but we are examining partnership with the private sector on the carbon tax. And also, if you take into account the context in Yemen, again, economically and politically and even the security situation doesn't allow for such initiatives at the moment. So we just started the implementation of waste to energy, in partnership with the private sector, and then we will see and examine how we can develop our initiative now more and how we can scale it up.
Great. Okay. Thanks a lot. And then there was also this question from Emmanuel, but I think you already have answered on that, Andrea. But nonetheless, do you would like to add something here?
Yes. Well, I mean, the paper, the link published, has been published on the Green Help Desk. It is extremely insightful, not only because it exemplifies what has happened in Jumeme or being implemented in Jumeme, but it also presents the theoretical framework behind this business model that I think responds a lot to what Nahid was mentioning. It's not only about piloting business models at a project level, but it has to be implemented across the sector as a whole. So we have worked on a theoretical framework that enables to assess in which context, which type of such business models. We call it the keymaker model, but it can be called in different ways. Keymaker model understood as the activities in the agro-processing sector, so electricity being the key, electricity access being the key, to access rural development via tapping on the local value chains that are mostly in rural areas related to agriculture. So this theoretical framework enables to assess in which context and which communities what type of such keymaker models could be implemented. In Lake Victoria, in Okara Island, that's where Jumeme has one of its sites. It made sense to focus on fish because the communities there are very much fishing communities. So that's one aspect that we also tend to not emphasize enough, I believe. Electricity access per se improves quality of life, but does not necessarily trigger development unless it is used for productive use. So what we aimed to do was, we want this community to thrive because they are our electricity customers. So them thriving implies also a positive benefit on the mini-grid business. But then for that to be the case, we need to also support them in their rural activities, which in this case, it's, like I said, fishing. So then we understood that there was a potential to bring the market closer to these fishermen by Jumeme themselves purchasing this fresh fish. And instead of the fishermen having to sell it at low prices and then this fish being transported long distance and the quality of the fish deteriorated, the electricity access in Okara Island itself enabled to deep freeze the fish so that the quality is preserved, utmost quality, until the final retail customers are serviced. But then again, that's one example. So now we are looking forward to pilot the same concept with vanilla and chili processing in Uganda. It's a very different context. And what we hope is to replicate more and more pilot projects to prove that this business model doesn't only work in one context, one value chain in one market, but rather has the potential to really transform the mini-grid sector by tackling what we were discussing before, the impact of rural industrialization as part of the off-grid electrification efforts.
Okay, great for also having this a bit more explained. Especially also with the keymaker model. I also would like to add another question then to Radhika, since we do still have the time for that. Radhika, many of the donors are now pushing towards higher tiers of electrification. And do you still see a large demand for PicoPV? And if so, are the buyers more from increasingly rural areas, or where do you see that then?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely still huge demand for PicoPV. I mean, when you look at the numbers of people that are still completely unelectrified, let alone those that are then under-electrified, meaning they have some connectivity but unreliable access and really need reliable, sustainable solutions at home, and that population is huge. And when you take into account affordability, it's really important for us to remember, what the households we're trying to reach can afford, and what the right sort of first step is, and eventually how do we work up towards larger systems and more productive use. In our case, about 80% of our customers are rural, so we're really looking at households that are very hard to reach through larger, either electric grid or even mini grid types of solutions. And currently, just about 16% of our customers use our products for business. And those 16% that are using them to support business or some sort of income generating activity are also using them at home. So there's still very much a huge need for household energy, really fundamental light, phone charging, radio, basic connectivity. And so, yeah, for as much as it's important that we look at larger solutions and think about moving people up, we think it's really important that we don't leave the smaller solutions behind, because there's still a lot of work to do there.
Yeah. Understandable. And we also do see that in our program, that this is also still like a market where we have potential to increase on one hand. On the other hand, of course, we try to also support the higher tier solutions. To also now finally come to an end. I mean, we have 5 minutes left. I would kind of wrap up and ask you, what for you is the key takeaway from the guide or from the session today? Also, maybe to underline it once more for the audience. What is important to consider while implementing off-grid projects? I would like to start here with you, Nahid. Could you shortly explain?
Yeah, I can sum it maybe in one sentence. It is very important to link the access to clean energy with the improvement of livelihood, and I'm talking from Yemen experience sitting in this country. And also how the access to clean energy and then the improve of livelihood can contribute to transform economy and improve the economy. So this is what we need to look at.
Great. Then I would like you to tell me your key takeaways and what is like also for your work most important, which you will take out of the session and the guide. Okay, you are muted.
You're asking me. Sorry, I'm the one.
Sorry. Yes. Sorry.
I got confused. Well, it's a bit aligned with we were saying before. I mean, one thing is to provide access today, and another thing is to sustain this access 10 years down the line. And for it to be meaningful, it should not be about maximizing impact today, but also making it sustained and ensuring longevity. And for that to be the case, I think it is necessary to really go from a one-sided thinking to really apply kind of systems thinking approach, where we contemplate all of the multiple dimensions of sustainability. Sustainability means different things to different people, or different organizations focus on sustainability in different ways. But I think that the approach of tackling the financial, the social, the technological, the institutional aspects and the ecological aspects of sustainability is really necessary to preserve this long-term sustained system thinking strategy. This would be for me to close, and I can maybe address the last question later in parallel. I'll pass you the floor.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. And indeed, I was first addressing Orki, but somehow she has some technical problem, it looks like. So, Orki, you are back.
Yes.
Can you now also answer this question quickly?
Yeah, well, this is all part of it, right? So this was a small electricity cut, so I just the network, Well, I would really say that to me, it's about what we call a bike in Dutch, fiets, and that's all the criteria of sustainability to reach scale. So look at finance, institutional, ecological, technical, and social. And there's such a lot of lessons learned that I find it difficult to pick, because I really, as I said before, I really believe that the change should be fixed in order not to fall. And I believe also that in Mali, different kind of technologies, because it's a very vast country, will remain necessary, and a very good, solid thinking about the system approach that has been presented is, according to me, necessary to really accelerate.
Great, thanks a lot for your view. And then finally, last but not least, Radhika, also your view, please.
Yeah, I think really just continued sustained innovation across all of the technologies that we've been talking about. So from Pico Solar to solar home systems to mini grids, not only in the innovation in the actual technologies deployed, but also the technology and the methods to deploy these systems. So the leveraging remote switch off capability, integration of mobile money, lots of data that we can gather from consumers and the operations of these systems is going to be needed. So a lot of innovation, a lot of learning from what's been working and what's not been working as we think about deploying in different geographies. And everyone, as everyone has already been talking about, really an eye towards what can sustain and really provide a reliable solution for consumers. I think all this is going to be needed to close this gap.
Thank you very much also for your view, and thank you all of you for this enriching discussion. Thanks a lot also to the audience. I have seen there was also a question from Mazida, which obviously were not posted in the Q&A part due to some technical issues, but nonetheless, thanks, Andrea, you have answered already in the chat box. Now it's, our time is over, and let me just once more thank you all for this interesting panel discussion, and I wish you all a good, interesting last day of the Vienna Energy Forum, and of course, later on, a good read of our launched guide. The link I will post again in the chat, and thank you very much, goodbye, and hope to see you soon.